Certainly, certainly. Michelle, your answer, it's like speaking my language. These are all things that we were thinking about when we were deciding to host this youth assembly. Of course, we ran into some slightly different obstacles because we're working with youth. And so we have 18-year-olds that we're trying to bring into a conversation that present unique challenges, for example, having to do with school, having to do with their ability to travel. And so when we were deciding to partake in the Citizens Assembly process, we really had to make sure that we had enough funding and enough resources to ensure that we could enable all of our participants and all of our expert speakers who came in to help out were able to participate as fully as possible. And we did that by fully funding all travel, fully funding all accommodations because we held the Citizens Assembly over 1 week, fully funding all meals, offering childcare, pet care. We also made sure that we had accessibility plans in mind for folks who needed alternative modes of transportation. We had arranged for all of that. And we really wanted to make sure that the barriers to entry were as low as possible, if non-existent. So this obviously requires a bunch of money. And so we, as a research organization, depend a lot on foundations and other grant funding in order to partake in these types of projects. So we're fortunate enough to have funding from the Canadian Internet Registry Authority to help us put on this type of event and make sure that we were able to include as many folks as possible in the deliberations. What came out of that, as I mentioned in my earlier answers, was a really diverse group of people that were able to give us amazing insights into their experiences with technology and their thoughts about how digital policy can better empower youth users. And at the end of the assembly, we had a full recommendation report that's available on our website that Hector shared in the chat. It's a long 40-page report, but with a series of policy recommendations that the youth wrote themselves that were then delivered to the Canadian federal government and other provincial government stakeholders as well. And some of those recommendation highlights include the creation of an arm's length regulatory body to help technological platform companies better assess the way that their technology platforms are used. Also, the enforcement of strong and secure identification measures on online platforms, the creation of standards for platform companies' terms of service to ensure that they're clear, concise, and barrier-free. We also heard calls for mandated offline periods in academic settings, allowing students to learn instead of feeling so tied to online platforms. Also, to set all accounts for users under 18 to private without the option for them to make those accounts public, and to ensure that platform policies are up to date with the lived experiences of youth by consistently incorporating their voices into policymaking processes. And these are just a few of the highlights from the report, some of the recommendations that the Youth Assembly put together. But as I mentioned, it would be fantastic if you read the report. If you have questions or thoughts or follow-ups, I'm happy to have a conversation, because there's some really amazing ways that we can draft policy when we hear from the people those policies will affect directly.